Hi guys, this is Horror Studio One. I have 2023 stories from subscribers. If you guys have any true scary stories you have yourselves, please don't hesitate to share it with my email, horrorstudio1@gmail.com. Please send it over as quickly as possible and we will get your stories on here. So let's grab a blanket, turn off your lights for True Scary Stories 2023 edition from you guys. Terrible roommate story. Greetings. I'm not sure if this is where I'm supposed to submit a new story to your channel, but here it is nonetheless. In October 2019, I was reunited with my ex. I'll call him Derek for the sake of this story. For 6 years prior to that, a part of me had regretted breaking up with him, so I was ecstatic and looking forward to picking up where we left off. Yes, I realized this was extremely naive and short-sighted of me. And as a result, against the advice of every important person in my whole entire life, I jumped on the first chance to move to a new city with him in the January of 2020. We rented a cute 2-bedroom duplex in an urban part of Southwest Washington and settled into the idea of fulfilling the 1-year lease that we signed. I was new to the area and he had all the information on events in the area, where to find the best food, where to hike, and so on. A part of me truly believed that no matter what the nature of our disagreements happened to be, we were both mature enough to keep the peace. This mentality lasted for about a month, and I can pinpoint exactly when it all fell apart. Derek had a knack for locating live music events, festivals, etc. And after 2 weeks of peacefully living in our duplex, he found an event in Portland, Oregon. It was a Middle Eastern dance party at a basement bar, and I spent a week looking forward to it. I was so distracted by putting our new home together and the fact that I landed an extremely attractive partner that I forgot about the fact that Derek was also extremely possessive, jealous, and paranoid. He didn't have a car, so instead of taking an Uber or Lyft, I drove us to the venue. We arrived at about 9 p.m. and he immediately began paying for round after round of drinks. We danced and generally had a good time for about an hour or two. The venue was packed and the acoustics made it difficult to communicate while the music played. At some point, I needed to find a restroom and I told Derek I would be back in a few minutes. I walked up the stairs of the basement bar and onto the main level, quickly locating the ladies' room. There was a line in front of the door and it took me approximately 15 minutes to do my business and then head back to our event, eager to continue dancing. Derek had left our booth and my jacket, but he hadn't sent me a text or call to let me know that he was going to do so. Having crossed the line from tipsy to drunk, I sat down in the booth and waited for Derek to come back. 10 minutes later, still no Derek. I felt my phone vibrate in my purse and discovered that Derek had left me a voicemail. A feeling of dread washed over me as the memories of his jealous temper came flooding back. I also remembered asking him to hold my car keys as my purse was full and I wanted to dance. While I wouldn't have attempted to drive at that point, I had a feeling that he was no longer at the venue. 2.5 hours in, I was ready to leave the crowded basement bar and head home. Keen on listening to Derek's voicemail, I walked back upstairs and stepped outside into the brisk night air and proceeded to play Derek's voicemail. It said something to the effect of, "Hey, I saw you eye-fucking that guy. Have a nice time dancing, and good luck finding a way home. Not." Click. I was dumbfounded by Derek's abrupt tone and the random nature of his accusation. I had no idea who he was talking about, and frankly, making moony eyes with strangers simply isn't something I do, intoxicated or otherwise. Furthermore, no one had just ever taken my car before that night. There I was, significantly intoxicated and standing around the outside of a venue that was located in a part of Portland that was less than safe. I must have been swaying at some point, because I can recall 2 strangers stopping to ask if I was alright. I had my phone and my purse, but no way to account for my car or to unlock the door to our duplex. Either way, I knew that I didn't want to stay at the venue until last call, and I proceeded to request an Uber. I can recall telling my Uber driver about what had happened on my way home. Fortunately, the driver was genuinely concerned for my well-being and said, "You realize that you can report your car stolen, right?" Did he specifically say that he was driving back to your place? That's totally unacceptable. "Yeah, you're right," I said. "I just hope he didn't lock me out of the house. And I hate to ask, would you mind waiting a couple minutes while I try to get back in?" "Sure. "No problem at all," he said. We pulled into our poorly lit complex, and I quickly discovered that Derek had stolen my car and locked me out of the house. At that point, I was starting to sober up, and knocking on the front door yielded no results. Out of sheer fury, I climbed over a hydrangea bush, popped the screen off of the living room window, and discovered that it was unlocked. I waved at the Uber driver to let him know that I was okay, that I'd be alright from here, and then I slithered into the living room, where Derek sat on the couch, staring straight at me. My car keys sitting on a shelf right next to the window. It was as though Derek had left them there to taunt me. I picked them up and threw them on the floor, yelling, "What the fuck, dude? What happened?" "Didn't you get my voicemail?" Derek sneered. "I'm sure you hooked up with that guy in the bathroom, so I decided to go home." "What guy are you talking about?" I yelled. Derek was never able to describe the man in question. I even unlocked my phone and tried to hand it to him, telling him to scroll through as many texts, emails, and messages as he wanted. He refused to take the phone, and I went straight to bed, sequestering Derek to the couch. He played many mind games similar to that after that night. Needless to say, we did not make it as roommates for more than another 2 months. Following several additional incidences, a call to the cops, and Derek intentionally taunting and leaving my indoor cat outside, I told him that I wanted him to leave and that I'd be fine with paying rent on my own. In April 2020, 3 months after signing our 12-month lease, Derek moved out, and I was finally able to breathe a sigh of relief. Hindsight is usually 20/20, and I certainly feel that way about this scenario. For several months, I kicked myself for moving in with Derek as quickly as I did, but the important thing is that I learned from my mistake. Eventually, I met my fiance, and we dated for more than a year before moving in together. But I hope someone reads this and takes it into consideration before succumbing to the allure of moving to a new city with someone you are not compatible with. And on a final note, Derek, should you ever see me again, I hope you've gotten your life together in some capacity, but please don't ever approach me again. Hooded Man in the Woods. My childhood best friend Marie and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown, and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright outside, beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick brush. So we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us. We hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer glancing through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then the sound of running footsteps followed. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and just get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement's lights off. We pick up speed as much as we could without breaking it into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop is only a minute walk away at this point. The path soon breaks and we are inside the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop, and I go along with it silently, understanding ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems whatever scared her is nowhere in sight at this point. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out in the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, had a terrible smirk on his face, and she swore that he had stopped running as she saw him putting something shiny away into his pocket. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes as we walked past, given the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reached the center of the lake and stopped paddling. I pulled up my Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God given me just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale. Lifting a hand to point out what she's seeing, I turned and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. He sat in the middle of the lake, and we watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us before finally disappearing. It took a few more tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time. As the sun got lower and lower, we did manage to have someone come with a truck. By the time we reached the shore, it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we weren't able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we just didn't go to the ice cream shop, inform an adult there, and ask her parents to come get us then. But it worked out. We got back safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. Chased by growling men. Hi, I'm typing this at work, so please, there's a lot of errors. I live in a medium-sized apartment building in a fairly major city. While the neighborhood I live in is a more safe side, gun violence is very high in my city as a whole, and we have a big trafficking problem. Now, despite this, I feel pretty safe going outside, especially since to my apartment building where it's mostly well lit and I am friendly with a few of the regular homeless people. Last night I got a final reminder that my safety isn't guaranteed, and I've been pretty shaken since. Last night around 12:20 a.m., I asked my partner if he wanted to share a joint with me, and when he declined, I locked the apartment and went downstairs myself. The exit I take spits me out on the main street, where there's still the occasional car driving by at this point. Usually this type of human presence comforts me, walking late at night, but tonight a lone black dark blue van approached in my peripheral and started to drive very slowly, matching my walking pace until I rounded the corner and the van was stopped by a stoplight. I found it very strange at the time, but the van was on the other side of the street and there were 1 or 2 other cars, so I brushed it off. Around the corner, there's a little food truck area with a bunch of picnic tables. They have like Christmas string lights hung up and a few other ambient lights that are kept on the whole night, but it barely illuminates the area. As I am walking past the picnic tables at this time, I notice a large man dressed in dark clothes sitting alone at one of the back tables. He was wearing a hood or hat, so I couldn't see his whole face, but his eyes followed me as I walked the border of the picnic area. My usual smoke spot is behind a fence on the other side of the picnic area. I was a little shaken by spotting that man, so I chose a slightly further spot against the side of the construction vehicle. I lit my joint and start puffing away and reading something on my phone. I start getting this really uneasy sensation. It felt like all my hairs were standing up on edge, and I got the most intense goosebumps I've ever felt. My phone was still playing music, and as I turned it off, I heard the shifting and rustling of gravel on the ground behind me. I swung my head around and saw a man reaching towards me with huge hands. I only caught a glimpse of his face before I fell to the ground. His eyes were wide, bulging, and extremely dark. They terrified me. His mouth was agape, and he was basically snarling at me. He scared me so bad I fell to the ground, stumbled, and broke into a run. All in like 1 second. I ran for a few seconds before I peeked behind my shoulder and saw him a couple yards behind me. At this point, I saw it as definitely the man who was sitting at the picnic table, and now I saw he was wearing what looked like a dirty bucket hat, fishing hat. He had shoulder-length, dirty, light-colored hair, and he was way taller than me, so at least 6 foot. He was definitely gaining on me, and I had lost ground by turning around, and I am not in the best shape to begin with. I was about to reach the first entrance of the building, but the issue was 1, there was double doors at this entrance that closed quite slowly, and 2, the only way up was an elevator, so if he got inside with me, I was screwed. I kept running, taking my chances with my running ability versus quickly opening doors ability. I kept running along the other side of the building to get to the second entrance of the building. This one was just 2 single doors, which opened to the stairwell up to my apartment. As I'm nearing this entrance, I see another man who appeared to be speed walking directly towards me from the opposite direction. I should note that throughout this, I've been hearing the growling and snarling of the first guy behind me, and as the second man gets closer, I hear him. He is also growling. I reach the keypad, unlock the first door, and quickly slam it closed behind me until I hear the lock click again. The second man reached the first door, and I saw his face more clearly as it slammed against the glass window of the door. He was also tall with longer hair, and I remember he was wearing overalls, but I mostly remember his wild eyes and his teeth that he gnashed at me right before I turned away, opened the second door, and booked it upstairs. I didn't even stop until I was inside my apartment, had all the doors locked, and was under the covers. I think that in retrospect, I didn't hear any sign of them following me up the stairs, but I was so convinced that they were on my tail. I think the only reason I got away from them was that they didn't know about the side entrance to my building. I saw the same van that creeped me out earlier parked across the street from the entrance to my building. I then looked down to see 3 men pacing along the side of the building, including the 2 that had chased me. I ducked down fearing they would see me. A few minutes later, they start shining flashlights into the windows of the apartments. At first, I think, of course, it's only my apartment, but after a while, it's clear they're just searching for me. At this point, I try to call my building manager to let him know about the situation, and he sent out a text alert to all our building people. I was so paranoid another innocent person would be accosted by them, so I called the police. They told me they were on their way and to stay out of the window in case they were armed. A few minutes later, the men are spooked by a faraway police siren, and they get into the van and peel away. I think it's from a different 911 call though, because when the officer arrived to our building, the siren wasn't on. I spent a long sleepless night thinking they'd come back, but they never did. Definitely going to avoid being alone at night from now on. I asked one of the homeless guys I'm friendly with if they ever saw anything suspicious last night, but he said he hadn't. They couldn't have been residents, says, because I know they didn't leave after management sent that message out. The part that sticks with me the most is the growling and intense look in their eyes. I don't know if they were on drugs or whatever, but they never said any words to me or each other. Haven't really heard any updates from the cops, but it's only been a few hours and they didn't seem that interested in my statements anyways, as the van had disappeared when they left. So, to the 2 men who growled at me and chased me to an apartment, fuck off.